The night didn't begin quietly. It shattered. Thunder ripped across the sky like something alive had torn it open, and the mountain estate answered with a groan of old stone and iron beams straining under the storm. Wind howled through narrow windows and high towers, carrying the sharp scent of snow and pine and blood. Before we continue, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Moonbound Werewolf romance stories just to support the community. Lyra ran. Bare feet slapped against cold stone floors, every step sending pain up her legs, but she didn't slow. She couldn't. The corridor stretched ahead of her, lanterns swinging wildly on their hooks, throwing shadows that twisted and leapt like grasping hands. Her breath came out in broken gasps, fogging the air in front of her mouth. Her chest burned. Her ribs ached. And still she ran. She could hear them behind her. Not paws. Boots. Heavy. Certain. Too fast. Men who hunted like wolves. The storm outside roared again, thunder shaking the walls, and for a heartbeat the sound almost drowned out the voices echoing through the halls. Almost. Deep, sharp voices carried easily through stone, led with excitement, hunger, control. She went this way. I smell blood. Lyra's blood. Her heel slipped on the slick floor where melted snow had blown in through an open window. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall just before she fell, her palm scraping against rough stone. Pain flared. She bit down hard on a cry. Sound would give her away faster than blood already had. Her heart hammered so violently she thought it might tear free of her chest. Every beat felt loud. Exposed. Like the walls themselves were listening. She forced herself forward again. The mountain estate was enormous, built not for servants like her, but for alphas, councils, power. Endless corridors, high ceilings, doors carved with symbols she'd been told never to touch. She had memorized these halls in silence over weeks of work, head down, eyes lowered, pretending she was invisible. Invisible didn't bleed. Invisible didn't run. Invisible didn't glow. A sharp heat rolled through her veins without warning, starting low in her stomach and racing outward. Her breath hitched as silver warmth surged beneath her skin, dangerous and alive, pressing against the cage she'd built inside herself. No. Not now. Fear tightened around her throat as she forced the feeling down, pressing it back with sheer will, like holding a door shut against a storm. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, trembling and urgent, from a time before everything burned. Hide it. Suppress it. Never let them see. Power is not a gift for girls like us. Power gets you killed. Lyra swallowed hard and ran faster. Another crack of thunder split the sky, and lightning flashed through the high windows, briefly illuminating the long hallway ahead. At the far end, stairs. Narrow. Steep. Servant stairs. Hope flickered. Small. Fragile. She took them two at a time, gripping the cold iron railing as she descended. The steps were slick, worn smooth by generations of feet. Her foot slipped again, and this time she fell hard, shoulder slamming into the wall as she slid down several steps. Pain exploded through her side. She cried out before she could stop herself. The sound echoed. Behind her, laughter answered. Low. Amused. Certain. "Oh, little maid," someone called, voice carrying easily. "You should have stayed where you belonged." Tears burned her eyes, but she forced herself up, ignoring the way her body screamed in protest. Blood trickled down her calf from a cut she hadn't even felt happen. Each step left a mark now. A trail. She knew what that meant. Wolves didn't need sight when they had scent. The storm outside intensified, rain turning to sharp pellets of ice that rattled against the windows. The mountain howled with it, wind tearing through the peaks like a living thing in pain. It felt fitting. The world itself sounded like it was breaking apart. Just like her. She reached the bottom of the stairs and burst into another corridor, lower, narrower, lined with servant doors and storage rooms. The air smelled of old wood, damp stone, and fear. Her fear. Thick. Suffocating. Her lungs burned. Every breath felt too small. She ducked into the first open door she saw, slamming it shut behind her and throwing the bolt just as a heavy impact hit the other side. The wood rattled violently. "Open it," a voice growled, "closer now." Too close. The door shook again as someone, hit it with far more force than a human should have. Lyra backed away, pressing herself into the far corner of the small storage room. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with cleaning supplies and old linens. There was nowhere to go. No window. No second door. The silver heat inside her surged again, stronger this time, reacting to the danger. Her vision blurred at the edges, and for a terrifying second, she felt the pressure behind her eyes, the burn along her spine, the pull of something ancient and vast trying to rise. Her nails dug into her palms as she fought it. "If they see my eyes glow, they'll kill me." The thought cut through her panic like ice. She squeezed her eyes shut, breathing hard, forcing the power down, 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 even as the door cracked under another blow. Wood splintered. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "Smell that," another voice said, almost fond. "She's afraid." The bolt bent. The door frame groaned. Lyra's mind raced, searching desperately for an escape that didn't exist. Her body shook with exhaustion and terror. She wasn't strong enough for this. She never had been. She had spent her whole life learning how to survive by being small. By being quiet. By being nothing. The door burst inward with a deafening crack, wood splintering as it slammed against the wall. Cold air rushed in, carrying the storm with it, and the scent of wolves. 3 men filled the doorway. Tall. Broad. Powerful. Their eyes gleamed unnaturally in the dim light, reflecting silver and gold. Not human. Not fully shifted. Somewhere in between. Their expressions were sharp with satisfaction, hunger barely restrained. Lyra pressed herself further into the corner, her back hitting stone. There was nowhere left to retreat. "There you are," one of them said softly, stepping inside. His boots crunched over broken wood. "You really made us work for it." She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "Please," she whispered. Her voice barely carried over the storm. "I didn't do anything." The man crouched in front of her, close enough that she could smell him, pine, iron, and something dark beneath it. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You were born," he said. "That's enough." The silver heat inside her erupted in response, no longer willing to stay caged. It surged up her spine, flaring behind her eyes, setting her nerves alight. Her breath caught, and she gasped, hands flying to her face as panic spiked. No! No, no, no! Thunder crashed overhead, shaking the building, and for a split second the lantern flickered, casting the room into shadow. When the light steadied, the men had gone still. One of them frowned. "Did you see that?" Lyra's heart stuttered. She slowly lowered her hands, terrified of what she might find. Her fingers trembled. Her skin felt too warm. Too tight. She didn't need to see her reflection to know. The silver had reached her eyes. Fear crashed over her harder than the storm outside. She scrambled backward, a sob tearing free of her chest as she pressed herself as small as she could, trying to hide what was already exposed. "I didn't mean to," she said, voice breaking. "I swear. I can control it. I can leave. I won't come back. Please." The men stared at her now, expressions no longer amused. Alert. Calculating. Dangerous. One of them straightened slowly. "Get the alpha." The word hit her harder than any blow. Alpha. This wasn't just punishment. This was something else. Footsteps echoed again in the corridor beyond the broken door, slower this time. Heavier. Controlled. The kind of steps that didn't rush because they didn't need to. The air changed as the presence approached. Even the men in the room shifted, straightening, their postures instinctively deferential. Lyra's pulse roared in her ears as she stared at the doorway, dread curling deep in her gut. The storm outside screamed. The blood moon hung low and full beyond the narrow window, its crimson light spilling through the cracks in the stone like an omen. Whoever was coming felt different. Stronger. Colder. Closer to the end of things. And as Lyra sat there, shaking and exposed, silver fire burning behind her eyes, one truth settled heavily in her chest. Running had only brought her deeper into the heart of the wolves. If this story pulls you in, if danger and destiny tangled together make your heart race, stay with me. Subscribe to Moonbound Werewolf Romance Stories. Because the night always remembers its chosen. The footsteps stopped just outside the doorway. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Measured. Controlled. Like whoever was approaching already knew exactly what they would find. The air thickened. Even the storm outside seemed to hesitate, thunder rolling farther away, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. The men who had cornered Lyra straightened without being told. Their shoulders pulled back. Their gazes lowered, not in fear, but in recognition of something higher in the hierarchy than brute strength. Power had entered the room. The lantern flame flickered once, sharply, then steadied. And then he stepped inside. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dressed in dark clothes that looked tailored for battle as much as command. His presence filled the small storage room without effort, pushing against the walls, the air, the men standing behind him. His eyes were a cold, piercing grey that missed nothing. They locked onto Lyra immediately. Kale. He didn't rush to her. Didn't snarl. Didn't smile. He simply looked. And somehow, that was worse. Lyra's silver-glowing eyes met his for half a second before she flinched away, heart slamming against her ribs. She could feel his attention like pressure on her skin, like hands that hadn't touched her yet, but already knew exactly where they would land. "You're bleeding," he said. His voice was calm. Low. Controlled. It cut cleanly through the room, through the storm, through her panic. Not loud. Not gentle. Certain. Lyra's gaze dropped to her leg, to the blood streaking down her calf. She hadn't even realized how badly it hurt until he said it. Pain bloomed all at once, sharp and hot. I can clean it," she whispered automatically, the servant in her rising out of old habit. "I didn't mean to make a mess." One of the men behind Cale scoffed. Another took a step forward. Cale lifted a hand. That was all it took. The movement was minimal, almost lazy, but the effect was immediate. The men froze, mid-step, like statues suddenly aware of their place. Cale didn't look at them. His attention never left Lyra. She felt exposed in a way she never had before. Not like prey. Like something being assessed. Weighed. Measured for truth. Then another presence slipped into the room. Where Cale felt like winter, controlled, sharp, inevitable, this one felt like a blade drawn slowly across skin. Dangerous not because it was loud, but because it enjoyed how close it was to cutting. Riven leaned against the broken door frame, one shoulder braced casually against splintered wood. His dark hair fell loosely around his face, eyes glowing faintly amber, as they traced Lyra's form with unsettling ease. His mouth curved, not quite into a smile. "And you're ours now," he said. The words weren't a threat. They were a statement. Lyra's breath caught painfully in her throat. Ours. The silver heat inside her reacted instantly, flaring sharp and fast, like it recognized something before her mind could catch up. She gasped softly, fingers curling into the fabric of her thin dress, as she fought to keep it down. Her fear spiked, but beneath it, something else stirred. Awareness. She shook her head, forcing the feeling away. "I don't belong to anyone," she said, voice trembling despite her effort. "I'm just a maid. I was hired to clean. I'll leave. I swear I will." Riven pushed off the door frame and stepped closer. Each step was unhurried. Confident. He stopped just out of reach, crouching slightly so they were closer to eye level. "A maid," he repeated softly. "Is that what you think you are?" His gaze flicked briefly to her eyes, still faintly glowing silver, then back to her face. Something sharp passed through his expression. Interest. Recognition. "You hired me," Lyra said, the words spilling out as panic scrambled her thoughts. Your people." "Weeks ago. I didn't lie about anything. I just needed work." Cale's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We did hire you," he said. "That much is true." Her heart stuttered. Riven's mouth curved slightly. "On purpose." The words hit her like a blow. Lyra stared at them, confusion and fear tangling tight in her chest. "What does that mean?" Cale finally glanced at the men behind him. "Leave?" One of them hesitated. "Alpha." Cale's eyes flicked toward him. The hesitation vanished. The men backed out quickly, boots crunching over broken wood as they retreated down the corridor. Within moments, the room was empty except for Lyra and the twins. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm. Riven straightened and took another step closer. Cale moved too, flanking her without touching, their presence boxing her in. She was acutely aware of the heat radiating from them, of how the air seemed charged now, alive. Lyra pressed herself back against the wall, breath shallow. "Please," she said again, softer this time. "If this is about my eyes, I can explain. I am not dangerous." Riven tilted his head, studying her. "You don't actually believe that," he said. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Cale spoke instead. "You've been hiding since the day you were born." It wasn't a question. Lyra's breath caught. "You don't know anything about me." "We know your name," Riven said lightly. "Lyra Ashwin." Her heart stopped. No one had called her that in years. She hadn't used her last name since before her pack fell. Since before fire and screams and silver light had torn her life apart. "How?" her voice broke. "How do you know that?" Cale's gaze sharpened. "Because you never should have been able to hide here. Not with that blood." Lyra's knees went weak. She slid down the wall despite herself, folding inward, arms wrapping around her middle like she could protect what was already exposed. "I didn't mean to come here," she said hoarsely. "I didn't know who you were. If I had, you would have run sooner." Riven asked. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Yes." Something dark and unreadable crossed his face. Cale crouched in front of her then, close enough that she could see the faint scar cutting through his eyebrow, the way his eyes reflected the lantern light like polished steel. He didn't touch her, but his presence was grounding and terrifying all at once. "Our wolves recognized you the moment you crossed the estate boundary," he said. "Your scent doesn't lie." Lyra swallowed hard. "I masked it." "You tried," Riven said. "Poorly." Cale ignored the jab. "You're not as weak as you think." Her laugh came out sharp and broken. "You don't know what I am." "We know exactly what you are," Riven said quietly. The silver heat surged again, stronger now, reacting to the certainty in his voice. Lyra squeezed her eyes shut, fighting it, shaking with the effort. Cale's voice softened, not gentle, but steady. "You're safe. For now." Her eyes flew open. "For now." Riven's smile returned, slow and dangerous. "That depends on you." Fear and something else twisted together in her chest. Attraction. Recognition. A pull she didn't understand and didn't want. "I don't belong here," she said. "I don't belong to you." Cale's gaze dropped to the blood on her leg again. "You belong alive." He reached out then, slowly, deliberately, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. His fingers closed around her ankle, firm and warm, and the contact sent a shock through her entire body. Silver heat flared violently, racing up her spine, lighting every nerve on fire. Lyra gasped. Cale stilled instantly. His eyes darkened. "Easy." Riven inhaled sharply behind him, eyes flashing. "You feel that?" "Yes," Cale said. Lyra trembled, overwhelmed. "Please don't," she whispered. I can't control it. Riven crouched beside her, his voice dropping. You don't need to. Not with us. Her heart hammered painfully as she looked between them, two alphas, powerful beyond anything she'd ever known, watching her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. I don't understand, she said. Kale met her gaze, unflinching. You will. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time, and the blood moon cast its red light through the cracked doorway, painting the room in shadow and omen. Lyra had run from wolves her whole life. Now she was sitting between two of the most dangerous ones alive. And for the first time, they weren't hunting her. They were claiming her. Kale did not touch her again. That, somehow, was what made everything unravel. He straightened slowly, withdrawing his hand from her ankle, as if breaking contact required effort. The warmth lingered where his fingers had been, a phantom heat that refused to fade. Lyra sat frozen against the wall, breath shallow, pulse racing, every nerve still buzzing with the echo of his grip. Riven watched her closely, eyes sharp, head slightly tilted, as if he were listening to something beneath her breathing. Something she couldn't hear. Look at her, Riven said quietly. Kale didn't need to be told. His gaze never left her. She's breaking, Riven continued. Not from fear. From holding herself together for too long. The words hit too close. Lyra laughed under her breath, the sound brittle. You don't know anything about me. Kale's voice came low and even. Then tell us. She flinched. Tell us. As if her life was something that could be spoken aloud without tearing her open. As if the past wasn't a thing with teeth. I can't, she said. Her throat tightened until the word barely made it out. You don't want to hear it. Riven crouched in front of her again, closer now but still not touching. His presence pressed in, not suffocating, anchoring. Try us, he said. The storm outside raged on, rain lashing against stone, wind screaming through the mountain passes. The estate groaned softly, an old beast weathering another violent night. Lyra stared at the floor between them. At the blood she'd left behind. At the way her hands shook no matter how tightly she clenched them. No one ever listens, she said finally. Not without deciding what I am first. Kale's jaw tightened. We're listening now. Silence stretched. Heavy. Expectant. The silver heat inside her stirred again, not violently this time, but restlessly, like something pacing behind a locked door. She pressed her palm against her chest, grounding herself in the rhythm of her heartbeat. Then she spoke. It started when I was 7. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears, like it belonged to someone else. We lived high in the northern valleys. A small pack. Quiet. My father hunted. My mother kept records for the council. I had friends. I had a place. Her breath hitched, just slightly. On the night it happened, there was snow. Thick and heavy. The kind that makes the world feel softer than it really is. The walls of the storage room seemed to fade as the memory took hold. She was 7 again. Small boots crunching through fresh snow. The scent of pine and smoke in the air. Laughter echoing between wooden houses built into the mountainside. I was outside, Lyra continued. Chasing my brother. He was faster than me, always was. I remember being angry about it. I remember thinking, I wish I was stronger. Her hands curled unconsciously. That's when it happened. The memory slammed into her without mercy. Heat. Sudden and terrifying. Not like a fever. Like fire poured straight into her veins. She remembered screaming, not in pain, but in shock. Remembered dropping to her knees in the snow as silver light burst from her skin, lighting up the entire clearing. Riven went still. Cale's eyes darkened. I didn't know what I was doing, Lyra whispered. I didn't know how to stop it. The snow melted around me. The air burned. People started shouting. Her voice cracked. She swallowed and forced herself to continue. My brother tried to reach me. He grabbed my arm. Her breath stuttered. He got burned. The room was deathly quiet. He lived, she said quickly, panic threading through her words even now. But the mark never faded. Neither did the fear. She squeezed her eyes shut. They called it the silver flame, she went on. An old name. One no one liked to say out loud. The elders came. They stared at me like I wasn't a child anymore. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Like I was a weapon. She opened her eyes and looked at the twins, then, really looked at them, bracing herself for the recoil she had learned to expect. It didn't come. Cale's expression was carved from stone, but his focus was absolute. Riven's gaze burned with something sharper than curiosity. Unstable, Lyra said bitterly. That was the word they used. Too dangerous. Too unpredictable. They said my power would bring ruin if it wasn't controlled. She laughed softly, hollow. No one asked me if I wanted it. The silver heat stirred, restless. My mother tried to protect me, Lyra continued. She argued. She begged. She reminded them of the old laws. Of mercy. Her throat tightened. They didn't listen. Her fingers trembled as she lifted her left hand, turning her wrist outward. There, faint but unmistakable, was an old scar, a thin line circling her skin like a brand. My mother did this, she said. The night before everything ended. Cale leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. She sealed my power, Lyra said. Or tried to. Blood and ash. Her blood. Ancient symbols burned into my skin while I screamed and begged her to stop. Tears slipped free despite her effort. She told me it was the only way to keep me alive. That if the elders sensed the silver flame again, they would kill me. Riven's voice was rough. Did it work? Lyra nodded slowly. For a while. Her gaze dropped again. 2 weeks later, the pack burned. The words landed like a death knell. She could still smell it, smoke and fur and iron. Could still hear the screams echoing through the valley as flames tore through wooden homes. Could still feel the way the seal on her power cracked under the weight of her terror. I don't know who attacked first, she said. Maybe it was us. Maybe it was them. All I know is that the silver flame broke free. Her voice shook now, memories flooding back in relentless waves. The elders tried to contain it. The council tried to suppress it. Someone screamed that I was the cause. Someone else shouted that I had to be destroyed before it spread. She hugged herself tighter. My mother pushed me into the snow and told me to run. She told me not to look back. She said I had to live long enough to matter. Her breath broke on a sob she couldn't hold back. I didn't listen. The silence in the room grew heavier. I turned around just in time to see the flames reach her. The storm outside seemed to answer her grief, thunder cracking violently overhead. She died screaming my name, Lyra whispered. And I ran. Cale's hands curled slowly at his sides. Riven's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping. They hunted me after that, Lyra went on, voice dull with old exhaustion. Not just my pack. Others. Alphas who heard rumors. Councils who feared what they couldn't control. She lifted her head, eyes empty. I learned how to disappear. How to hide my scent. How to lie. Her mouth twisted bitterly. How to sell myself as something harmless. She told them about the years that followed. About being passed from pack to pack under false names. About being kept, then discarded. About being locked away during full moons. About learning to scrub floors and bow her head and never, ever let anyone see her eyes for too long. I became useful, she said quietly. And usefulness is safer than power. The silver heat inside her pulsed faintly, like a heart that refused to stop beating. That's how I ended up here, she finished. A maid in an alpha estate. I thought I could hide forever. She fell silent then, words spent, body trembling with the weight of everything she'd carried alone. For a long moment, neither twin spoke. Cale finally broke the silence. His voice was lower than before. Tighter. They lied to you. Lyra laughed weakly. Everyone says that. They lied, he repeated, sharper now. The silver flame isn't unstable. It's rare. Riven leaned closer, his voice almost reverent. Ancient. Lyra shook her head. They said it ends rains. That it turns alphas into ash. Riven's eyes flickered. It does. Her breath caught. Cale continued calmly. Not because it's evil. Because it doesn't bow. Lyra stared at them, heart pounding. Then why am I still alive? Riven smiled, slow and dangerous. Because someone hid you very well. Cale's gaze softened, just slightly. And because fate is patient. She didn't know how to respond to that. The words felt too big. Too heavy. I don't trust anyone, she said quietly. Riven didn't deny it. You shouldn't. Cale met her gaze, steady and unflinching. But you can trust us not to fear you. The silver heat inside her stirred again, not violently, but curiously. For the first time in her life, the men standing in front of her weren't looking at her like a mistake. They were looking at her like a truth. They did not take her through the main halls. Cale led the way down a narrow stone passage hidden behind a tapestry older than the estate itself. Riven followed close behind her, not touching, but close enough that Lyra could feel his presence like a steady heat at her back. The air changed as soon as the door sealed behind them. Cooler. Older. It smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic, like rain striking stone after centuries of silence. Lyra's bare feet ached with every step, but she didn't slow. The silver heat inside her had gone quiet, coiled tight and watchful, as if it sensed where they were going. That frightened her more than the earlier chaos. Power she could feel, but not here, was always the most dangerous. The passage sloped downward, deeper beneath the mountain. The storm above faded until thunder became a distant murmur, like the world was slowly closing its mouth. The only sounds left were their footsteps and her breathing. "You feel it," Riven said quietly behind her. It wasn't a question. Lyra nodded despite herself. "It feels like the ground is listening." Cale glanced back at her, eyes reflecting faint light from the torches lining the walls. "It is?" The passage opened suddenly, the stone walls giving way to moonlight. Lyra stopped short. Before them stretched a forest she had never seen, though she had worked on the estate for weeks. Massive trees rose into the open air, their trunks pale and smooth, leaves shimmering faintly like polished bone. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, silver and blue, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Moonstone Forest. She had heard servants whisper the name like a warning. No one went there. No one was invited. The air hummed. Not with sound, but with presence. Ancient. Patient. Alive. Lyra took a hesitant step forward. The moment her foot touched the forest floor, the silver heat surged. She gasped softly, clutching at her chest as warmth flooded her veins, no longer frantic, no longer painful. This was different. This felt like recognition. Like being called by name from a distance too great to answer with words. The trees responded. Leaves shivered without wind. Pale bark glowed faintly along spiral patterns carved by time, and something more deliberate. The forest exhaled, slow and deep. Riven swore under his breath. Cale stopped beside her, posture alert, eyes scanning the clearing. It's reacting already. Lyra's pulse pounded. I didn't do anything. You don't have to, Riven said. That's the point. They moved deeper into the forest, the ground soft beneath their feet, untouched by frost despite the storm raging above. Lyra's senses sharpened with every step. She could hear the subtle creak of roots shifting beneath the soil, feel the pulse of something ancient moving through the land. At the heart of the forest stood the altar. It rose from the earth like it had grown there, not built. A single slab of moonstone, smooth and luminous, etched with symbols that twisted the longer she looked at them. They weren't carvings. They were scars. Old ones. Deep ones. Lyra's breath caught painfully in her throat. She knew this place. Not from memory. From something older. Her feet moved without her permission, carrying her closer. Each step made the silver heat flare brighter, stronger, until it spread across her skin in waves. She felt exposed, stripped down to something raw and true. Cale reached out, catching her arm gently but firmly. Wait. She turned to him, eyes wide. I need to. I know, he said. His voice was steady, but his grip tightened just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. But you don't kneel here. The word struck something deep. Kneel. Lyra swallowed. I don't understand any of this. Riven stepped ahead of them, stopping just short of the altar. The moonlight caught his face, highlighting the sharp lines of his cheekbones, the intensity in his eyes. No one ever does at first. He looked back at her. This is older than packs. Older than councils. This place existed before alphas learned to rule. Lyra's heart hammered. Then why bring me here? Kale released her arm and stepped beside her. Because it's already called you. As if in response, the altar pulsed. Soft silver light bloomed across its surface, spreading outward like veins beneath skin. The symbols ignited one by one, glowing brighter, as Lyra drew closer. Her wrist burned suddenly. She cried out softly, clutching it as pain flared along the old scar her mother had carved there. The thin line glowed white-hot, the seal unraveling thread by thread. Light spilled from beneath her skin, racing up her arm, across her chest, along her throat. Kale, she gasped. He was already there, steadying her as her knees threatened to give out. Breathe, he said. Don't fight it. I don't know how not to, she whispered, panic clawing at her chest. Riven circled slowly, eyes locked on the mark as it continued to burn. The seal is unraveling. Lyra shook her head. It can't. My mother, she bought you time, Kale said quietly. Not safety. The pain shifted suddenly, transforming into something deeper. Heavier. Like pressure behind her ribs, like something vast pressing outward, demanding space. The forest responded violently. Roots tore free of the ground, not in destruction, but in alignment, curling toward the altar. Light spilled between the trees, silver and gold intertwining, illuminating the clearing until it looked like dawn had broken beneath the earth. Lyra screamed as the birthmark at the base of her throat ignited. She collapsed to her knees, not in submission, but because her body could no longer hold her upright. The ground did not allow her to fall. Stone rose beneath her, lifting her gently, supporting her weight. The altar's light surged, enveloping her in a column of silver fire that did not burn, did not consume. It welcomed. Kale and Riven both stepped back instinctively, wool stirring beneath their skin in agitation and awe. Lyra's eyes glowed blindingly bright as visions flooded her mind. Flames sweeping across ancient battlefields. Wolves bowing their heads not in fear, but in reverence. Alphas kneeling, not broken, but chosen. A woman standing at the center of it all, silver fire wrapped around her like a crown. A voice echoed through the clearing. Not loud. Endless. The flame-bound will kneel to none, and command even alphas. The words vibrated through bone and stone alike. Lyra sobbed as the vision receded, shaking her head wildly. No. No, I can't. I'm not. The light dimmed slowly, reluctantly, as if obeying her resistance rather than losing strength. When it finally faded, Lyra collapsed forward, gasping, hands braced against the altar's cool surface. Her skin still glowed faintly, silver veins tracing her pulse beneath the flesh. Kale was at her side instantly, steadying her shoulders. Riven stared at the altar, breath slow and deliberate. Queen level, he said quietly. Kale didn't argue. Lyra laughed weakly, hysteria edging the sound. You're wrong. I scrub floors. I clean blood out of stone. I hide in corners. Kale turned her gently to face him. His eyes were intense now, no longer cold. Focused. You survived annihilation. You carry a bloodline that predates everything I rule. Riven joined them, crouching so they were eye level. Servants kneel because they are forced to. You don't kneel because you can't. Lyra shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. I'm not strong enough for this. Cale's voice dropped. Strength isn't what makes you dangerous. Riven's gaze softened, just a fraction. It's choice. The forest settled slowly, roots sinking back into the earth, light dimming to a faint glow that lingered in the air like dust after a fire. The altar fell silent, its symbols fading, as if satisfied. Lyra sagged between them, exhaustion crashing down all at once. I don't want to rule anyone, she whispered. I just wanted to live. Cale brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch careful, reverent. Then live, he said. But understand this. Riven finished quietly. The world won't let you be small anymore. Lyra closed her eyes, silver light flickering faintly beneath her lids. For the first time, she understood the truth her mother had died to protect. She was never meant to hide. She was meant to change everything. The forest had not finished echoing when the world answered back. It began as a tremor underfoot. So subtle at first that Lyra thought it was her knees shaking again. She leaned harder into the stone of the altar, trying to steady herself, breathing through the lingering heat beneath her skin. The silver glow had faded, but the afterimage of it clung to her senses, like the way lightning left ghosts behind your eyes long after the sky went dark. Then Cale stiffened. Riven's head snapped up. The ground trembled again, stronger this time. Leaves shook loose from the moonstone trees, drifting down in slow, uneasy spirals. Somewhere beyond the forest, a horn sounded, low, long, deliberate. Not a warning. A declaration. Cale's jaws set. They felt it. Lyra's heart lurched. Felt what? Riven's gaze was already fixed on the forest edge, pupils flaring. You? Another horn answered the first. Then another. Different pitches. Different distances. Surrounding. Lyra pushed herself upright, dread coiling tight in her stomach. Who is that? Cale didn't soften the truth. Alphas. The word landed heavy. Riven stepped closer to Lyra, instinctively placing himself half a step in front of her, though he didn't block her view. Rival packs. Old ones. The kind that don't ignore prophecy. The silver heat inside her stirred, restless again, sensing threat. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the energy humming beneath her skin. I didn't mean to call anyone, she said. I didn't know. This was inevitable, Cale said. The moment the altar responded, the balance shifted. The forest parted ahead of them. Not violently. Not chaotically. With purpose. Figures emerged between the moonstone trunks, tall, broad, cloaked in authority, and teeth barely restrained beneath skin. Wolves walked beside them, some fully shifted, others half-formed, eyes glowing with predatory interest. Alphas. Dozens of them. Their scents crashed into Lyra all at once, iron, smoke, frost, blood. Power led over power, crushing in its weight. Her knees threatened to buckle again, not from fear alone, but from the instinctive pressure of dominance pressing down on her senses. She had spent her life avoiding places like this. Now they had come to her. A tall alpha with ash-blonde hair stepped forward first, his presence sharp and aggressive. His eyes locked on Lyra instantly, narrowing. "So," he said, voice carrying easily through the clearing. "The rumors were true." Another alpha laughed, low and humorless. "Silver flame. I thought it was a myth." A third snarled. "It should have stayed one." Kale moved forward, placing himself fully between Lyra and the approaching packs. His shoulders squared, his posture unmistakably alpha. Riven mirrored him on the other side, flanking without a word. "This is Moonbound territory," Kale said. "You weren't invited." The ash-blonde alpha smiled thinly. "Your land trembled, Kale. Your forest lit up like a signal fire. You don't get to pretend this is private anymore." Lyra's breath came shallow. Every instinct screamed at her to disappear, to fold inward and make herself small. The silver heat resisted, pressing outward, bristling at the hostility. "She's dangerous," someone said sharply from the crowd. "You know the stories." "She burned her own pack," another added. Lyra flinched. Riven's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "That's enough." The murmuring didn't stop. It grew. "She'll destroy us all. She's unbound. That power doesn't answer to anyone. That's the problem." Lyra's chest tightened painfully. She hadn't realized how deeply the old words still cut until she heard them again, spoken with the same certainty, the same fear. Kale lifted a hand, silencing his wolves with a single motion. "You will lower your voices," he said coldly. "You're standing on sacred ground." The ash-blonde alpha's gaze flicked briefly to the altar, then back to Lyra. "Sacred or not, that thing doesn't belong here." Lyra's fingers curled into her sleeves. "Thing?" Riven growled low in his chest, the sound vibrating with barely restrained violence. "Choose your next words carefully." The alpha scoffed. "Or what? You'll fight every pack here." Kale didn't answer immediately. His silence stretched, deliberate, calculating. Lyra felt it like a knife. The ash-blonde alpha seized on it. "You know what she is," he pressed. "You've read the same prophecies we have. The flame-bound doesn't kneel. She overturns thrones. She ends reigns." Lyra's heart pounded as every gaze shifted back to her. "She doesn't get to exist unchecked," another alpha said. "Not for the sake of all of us." The words slammed into her with familiar force. Unchecked. Unstable. Too dangerous. Kale's jaw tightened. Riven's posture remained rigid, eyes dark. "She is under our protection," Kale said finally. A ripple of reaction moved through the gathered packs. "For now," the ash-blonde alpha said. "But councils will convene. Elders will demand answers. And they'll demand her," another voice added. "Before she grows into something none of us can stop." Lyra's pulse roared in her ears. She looked between Kale and Riven, searching their faces for certainty. For reassurance. For something solid to hold on to. Kale said nothing. Riven's expression flickered, fast, unreadable, before he masked it again. The silence stretched. Too long. The ash-blonde alpha smiled. "You see. Even they know." Lyra's chest caved inward. This was how it always happened. This was the moment people decided her existence was negotiable. Hand her over, the Alpha said. Let the councils decide her fate. It's the only way to avoid war. The word fate echoed in Lyra's skull, hollow and cruel. She waited. Waited for Kale to say no. Waited for Riven to bare his teeth. Waited for something, anything, that would tell her she wasn't alone. Kale's gaze remained fixed on the opposing Alpha, his expression unreadable. Riven inhaled slowly, sharply, then said nothing. Lyra felt the last fragile thread inside her snap. They are deciding whether I'm worth a war, she realized. And no one was choosing her. The forest felt suddenly too open, too exposed. The moonlight too bright. The weight of all those eyes pressed down on her until breathing hurt. Without another word, she took a step back. No one noticed at first. She took another. Then another. The silver heat inside her curled inward, not flaring, not fighting. Retreating. Hiding. It knew this feeling. It remembered how to survive abandonment. Lyra turned. She didn't run. She walked. Each step away from the altar felt like tearing something loose inside her chest, but she kept moving, slipping between moonstone trees, the forest parting reluctantly this time, as if protesting her departure. Behind her, voices rose again, sharper now, angrier, but none of them spoke her name. She didn't look back. By the time Kale finally spoke, it was too late. Lyra. Her name carried through the forest, but it didn't stop her. If anything, it hurt more. Proof that he could say it, just not soon enough. Riven spun, eyes widening as he realized the space beside them was empty. She's leaving. Kale cursed under his breath. Lyra broke into a run once the trees closed around her, tears blurring her vision as the forest swallowed her whole. Branches clawed at her skin. Roots snagged her feet. She didn't care. She had heard silence before. She knew what it meant. The world had made its choice. And once again, Lyra Ashwin walked away alone. Lyra didn't stop running until the forest thinned into rock. Moonstone trees gave way to jagged stone, and narrow mountain paths slick with rain. Her lungs burned, every breath tearing at her throat, but she kept moving until her legs finally betrayed her. She stumbled, caught herself on a rough outcrop, and collapsed into the shadow of a narrow ravine where the wind couldn't reach her as easily. The storm had followed. Rain lashed the mountainside in cold sheets, soaking her hair, her clothes, her skin. Thunder rolled overhead, close enough that it felt like the sky was cracking apart. Lyra curled inward, arms wrapped tight around her middle, teeth chattering as much from shock as from cold. She pressed her forehead against her knees. Don't feel. Don't think. Don't burn. The silver heat inside her churned violently, responding to her pain, her fear, her loneliness. It wanted to rise. It wanted to scream. It wanted to answer the storm with fire. She forced it down. Always down. She stayed there for a long time, letting the rain hide her tears. Letting the mountain swallow the sound of her breathing. When she finally lifted her head, the sky had darkened further, clouds swallowing the moon entirely. The world felt smaller without its light. Safer. She moved again, slower this time, careful. She followed the rock face until she found a narrow cave mouth hidden behind a curtain of vines and stone. It was shallow but dry, the rock inside smooth and worn, like something had sheltered here many times before. Lyra slipped inside and sank against the back wall. Only then did she let herself feel how badly she was hurt. Her leg throbbed fiercely where she'd been cut. Her shoulder screamed with every movement. Bruises bloomed across her ribs. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. This was familiar too. Pain without witnesses. She closed her eyes and breathed through it, counting heartbeats, grounding herself the way she'd learned over years of hiding. When her breathing finally slowed, she focused inward. The silver heat resisted at first, restless and angry, but she coaxed it gently, the way her mother once had. Not with force. With care. Easy, she thought. Not now. Not yet. The power obeyed, reluctantly, settling into a low, steady hum beneath her skin. It didn't vanish. It never did. But it listened. That was new. Lyra stayed hidden for days. Time blurred in the mountains, marked only by hunger, exhaustion, and the slow healing of her wounds. She gathered rainwater in hollow stone, foraged roots and berries she recognized from years of running. At night, she slept lightly, senses sharp, always listening. She knew they were looking for her. She could feel it in the way the forest stirred. In the way the air shifted when wolves passed nearby, careful and deliberate, never crashing through underbrush, never announcing themselves. They weren't hunting her like prey. They were searching. Kale moved through the mountain like a strategist. He didn't rush. Didn't call out. He tracked Lyra's path through subtle signs, scuffed stone, broken twigs, the faint trace of her scent masked but never raised. His mind replayed the moment she'd turned away from the altar, the way her shoulders had folded inward, the way she'd left without anger. That hurt more than if she'd screamed. She thought we were choosing them, Riven said quietly as they moved through the forest's edge, rain slicking his dark hair back from his face. She thought we were deciding whether she was worth it. Kale's jaw clenched. We should have spoken. Riven let out a sharp breath. You hesitated. Kale didn't deny it. He'd hesitated because the prophecy had been screaming in his head. Because every alpha instinct he possessed had collided with the weight of ancient words and future bloodshed. Because he had seen what power like hers did to the world. And because he was afraid. She's not a weapon, Riven continued, voice tight. She's a woman who's been running since she was a child. I know, Kale said. His voice was rough. That's why we find her. Before someone else does. They followed her trail upward, away from the forest, into harsher terrain. Wolves howled in the distance, rival packs circling, probing the borders. Riven's lips curled. They won't get her. Not while we breathe, Kale agreed. On the fourth night, Lyra's control faltered. It happened when she tried to stand too quickly, pain spiking sharply through her leg. Her balance went, and she hit the cave wall hard, air leaving her lungs in a gasp. Panic flared instinctively, sharp and bright. The silver heat surged. Light spilled across the cave, silver flames licking harmlessly along stone, illuminating the space in a soft, dangerous glow. Lyra cried out, scrambling to contain it, terror clawing at her chest. No, no, stop. The power responded to her fear instead of her will, flaring brighter. And then, footsteps. Controlled. Familiar. Lyra froze. The light dimmed instinctively, the silver pulling back under her skin as fast as it had erupted. She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, breath shallow. A shadow fell across the cave mouth. Cale stepped inside. The firelight from a torch in his hand painted his features in gold and shadow, emphasizing the hard lines of his face, the tension in his posture. His gaze locked onto her instantly. "Lyra," he said. Just her name. Her chest tightened painfully. She looked away, shame and hurt tangling viciously. "Go away." Cale didn't move closer. He lowered the torch instead, setting it carefully against the cave wall. The fire crackled softly, warm and steady, pushing back the cold without crowding her. "I won't," he said quietly. Riven appeared behind him a moment later, ducking into the cave with easy grace. His eyes scanned Lyra quickly, noting the injuries, the exhaustion, the way she was braced for rejection. "Found you," he said softly. Lyra laughed bitterly. "Congratulations." Riven winced. Cale's jaw tightened. "We weren't deciding your fate," Cale said. "We were deciding how many bodies would fall before this ended." Lyra's hands shook. "And you needed time to see if I was worth it." "No," Riven snapped, stepping closer before Cale could stop him. "We needed time to keep you alive." She looked up then, eyes flashing. "You should have said something." "I know," Cale said. "And I'm sorry." The word landed heavy between them. Silence stretched, thick and fragile. Riven crouched near the fire, his posture relaxed but his attention fixed on Lyra. "You're hurt." "I've been worse," she said automatically. Cale moved then, slow and deliberate, stopping a few feet away. "May I?" She hesitated, then nodded once. He knelt and carefully examined her leg, his touch gentle, precise. The silver heat stirred but didn't flare. Lyra watched him, heart aching with how careful he was being. "You didn't let it take you," he said quietly. She shrugged. "I never do." Riven's voice dropped. "You shouldn't have to do that alone." Lyra's throat tightened. "I always have." Cale met her gaze. "That doesn't mean you always will." The fire crackled softly, filling the space between their breaths. Riven spoke next, his tone uncharacteristically raw. "I don't care what the prophecy says." Lyra looked at him. "I don't care what you might become," he continued. "I won't lose you because the world is afraid." Her eyes burned. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "You run to protect others. You hide power to survive. You've never once used it to dominate." Cale finished quietly, "That's what terrifies them." Lyra swallowed hard. "And you?" Cale held her gaze. "It terrifies me too." The honesty stunned her. "But fear doesn't decide my loyalty," he added. "Choice does." Something fragile inside her shifted. Riven leaned closer, voice low. "Trust us. Or leave. But don't disappear because you think you're unwanted." Lyra's breath trembled. "If I stay, everything changes." Cale nodded. "Yes." She looked between them, the firelight catching silver in her eyes. And for the first time in her life, staying felt more terrifying than running. She leaned forward without thinking. Cale froze. Riven's breath caught. The space between them narrowed, charged and aching, lips almost touching. A distant howl split the night. All three went still. Riven cursed under his breath. They are close. Cale stood, tension snapping back into his posture. We move now. Lyra's heart sank even as she rose, but this time, when they left the cave together, she didn't walk alone. The fire burned behind them, steady and waiting. They didn't march her into the council chamber. They paraded her. Lyra felt at the moment the iron doors groaned open, the shift in air, the collective hunger hiding behind ritual masks and carved stone. Torches lined the circular hall, their flame steady, controlled, nothing like the wildfire coiled under her skin. The ceiling rose high above, lost in shadow, etched with old symbols meant to remind everyone who held power here. The council sat in a half-moon formation. Elders, alphas, pack leaders whose names carried weight like weapons. And every single one of them was watching her bleed. Not openly. Not dramatically. Just enough. A shallow cut along her palm, reopened by accident when they'd taken her arm to guide her forward. Blood slipped free in slow, deliberate drops, dark against the pale stone floor. Lyra felt the pull immediately, the way the room breathed it in. Her stomach turned. This wasn't judgment. This was preparation. Cale walked at her right, rigid, controlled, his expression carved from stone. Riven was on her left, closer than necessary, his arm brushing hers with every step, like he was reminding himself she was still real. Still here. Still his to protect. Lyra's heart pounded, not with fear alone, but with a growing, sickening clarity. They had planned this. The altar waited at the center of the chamber. Not the ancient one beneath the moonstone forest. This was different. Sharper. Carved with authority instead of reverence. Chains lay coiled at its base, silver-threaded and humming softly, reacting to her presence. Her breath caught. No. She stopped walking. The guards tightened instantly, hands reaching, shoving her forward. Lyra stumbled, barely catching herself as pain shot through her injured leg. What is this? She demanded, her voice echoing too loudly in the chamber. The High Elder rose slowly from his seat. Old, white-haired, eyes like frozen ash. A confirmation, he said calmly. Of what you are. Riven snarled. The sound was low, dangerous, barely contained. You said this was a hearing. And it is, the elder replied, unbothered. A hearing of truth. Cale's gaze flicked to the chains, then to the symbols carved into the altar. His jaw tightened. Explain, he said. The elder smiled. Lyra had never hated a smile more. For generations, the elder began, pacing slowly, we have guarded the balance of our world. Alphas rule because they must. Power is structured because chaos destroys. His eyes settled on Lyra. And then you appear. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. She carries the silver flame. A bloodline that should be extinct. A force that answers to no alpha. Lyra's chest tightened. She shook her head. I don't want any of this. The elder's gaze sharpened. That is precisely the problem. Before she could react, a council mage stepped forward and seized her bleeding hand. Lyra cried out as the cut was sliced deeper, clean and deliberate. Blood welled instantly, thick and hot, spilling over the mage's fingers and dripping onto the altar. The chamber shuddered. The symbols ignited. Silver light flared, violent and hungry, crawling along the stone like living fire. Lyra screamed. The power inside her surged in response, furious at being pulled without permission. She fought it, instinctively, terror ripping through her as the ritual latched onto her blood like a parasite. Stop! Riven roared, lunging forward. Guards slammed into him from both sides. Kale moved at the same time, but slower. Just one breath. One fraction of hesitation, as his mind tried to calculate outcomes, casualties, war. That breath cost everything. Chain snapped upward, wrapping around Lyra's wrists, her ankles, her waist. Silver bit into her skin, burning cold and searing hot all at once. She thrashed, sobbing, the sound raw and animal as the ritual dragged at her core. They are using her as a conduit, Kale said, horror finally breaking through his control. The elder nodded. A living weapon must be tested. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in fear. Others in fury. She'll destroy us. She's already cursed. End it now. Lyra's vision blurred. The room tilted, voices blending into noise as the power inside her raged, trapped between suppression and survival. Memories slammed into her without warning. Fire. Screams. Her mother's hands shaking as she pressed blood and ash into Lyra's skin. Hide it. Seal it. Live? I won't, Lyra gasped. I won't be this. Riven tore free of one guard, shifting partially, claws ripping through stone as he charged again. Let her go. Kale finally moved. But the elder raised a hand. Alpha Kale, he said smoothly. If you interfere, this council will declare war on your pack. On every pack that stands with you. The chamber held its breath. Kale stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to destroy everything in front of him. He looked at Lyra, really looked at her, and saw the truth written across her face. Not rage. Not ambition. Betrayal. Her eyes met his, silver bleeding through the brown. And something in her broke. Riven didn't hesitate. He stepped between Lyra and the council, shoulders squared, blood running from his temple, eyes blazing. Then declared. The elder's smile vanished. You would doom us all. Riven's voice shook with fury. No. You already did. The chains cracked. Not from force. From refusal. Lyra screamed, not in pain, but in release, as the seal her mother had placed finally shattered. The silver flame erupted outward, not wild, not mindless, but vast and absolute. It didn't burn the chamber. It judged it. The altar exploded into shards of light. Chains dissolved like ash. The ritual imploded, throwing council members from their seats, shattering stone, snuffing torches in a violent rush of power. The air screamed as Lyra rose off the ground, silver fire wrapping around her like wings. Every voice fell silent. She hovered there, trembling, eyes blazing, blood floating from her palm in glowing droplets. "No," she said softly. The word carried more weight than any roar. "I am not your weapon." The power surged again, rippling outward, forcing every wolf in the chamber to their knees, alphas included. The council slammed into the stone, gasping, crushed beneath a force they could not command. Cale dropped to one knee, breath knocked from his lungs, but his gaze never left her. Riven stood, barely, teeth bared in something like awe and terror and devotion all at once. Lyra descended slowly, the silver flames dimming but not disappearing. When her feet touched the ground, cracks spread through the stone beneath her. She looked at the elder. "You took my blood," she said, voice steady now. "You took my choice." The elder tried to rise. Failed. "You fear me," Lyra continued. "Because I won't kneel." She turned away from him then and faced the chamber. "But hear this," she said, her voice carrying to every corner. "I didn't come to rule you. I came to survive you." The silver fire pulled inward, settling beneath her skin once more, but this time, it didn't hide. It waited. Lyra walked toward Cale and Riven, each step deliberate. When she reached them, she stopped. Cale lifted his head, guilt and awe warring across his face. "Lyra." She raised a hand. He fell silent. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then she spoke, her voice quiet, devastated, and unbreakable. "You hesitated." Cale swallowed hard. "I won't again." Riven stepped closer to her side, unashamed, unwavering. "Never." Lyra looked between them, the betrayal still burning, the bond still pulling. The council lay broken behind her. The world had revealed its teeth. And Lyra, finally unchained, had revealed hers too. The ground didn't just tremble. It remembered. The first crack split the stone beneath Lyra's feet like a heartbeat breaking ribs. A deep, resonant fracture that rolled outward from her body, racing through the council chamber, through the mountain bones beneath the estate, through ruins that had slept longer than any living wolf remembered. Lyra felt it before she heard it. A pull. Ancient. Vast. Not demanding. Calling. She staggered, breath hitching, silver fire flaring instinctively as the world tilted. Cale moved instantly this time, hands gripping her arms, steadying her without restraining her. Riven was there too, close, protective, his body angled outward like he was daring the world to try again. But this wasn't an attack. This was awakening. The chamber walls screamed as old enchantments failed. Stone peeled back like dead skin, revealing older carvings beneath, symbols carved by hands that had known Lyra's power not as myth, but as truth. The elders scrambled, panic finally breaking their composure. "What have you done?" someone shouted. Lyra barely heard them. The silver flame inside her wasn't raging anymore. It was aligning. Her vision blurred, then sharpened, the world splitting into layers, present stone and ancient echoes overlapping. She saw the chamber as it had been centuries ago, before thrones, before councils, before fear hardened into law. Wolves stood in circles then. Equals. Leaders chosen by will, not dominance. And at the center. Her. Not this Lyra. But her blood. Her fire. Her legacy. The mountain groaned. A section of the chamber collapsed inward, revealing a tunnel that spiraled downward into darkness lit by silver veins pulsing through the rock. Heat rolled up from below, warm and alive, carrying the scent of ash, moonlight, and something old enough to feel like home. Cale's breath came shallow. "The ruins," he said. "They are not myths." "No," Lyra whispered. "They are waiting." She stepped forward. The council shouted after her. Guards lunged. The floor surged upward in a wall of silver light, slamming down between Lyra and the chamber with finality. Stone sealed. Sound vanished. There was only the tunnel now. And the pool. Riven swore under his breath. "Of course you'd walk into the heart of it." Lyra didn't look back. "You don't have to follow." Cale's voice was quiet. "Absolute." "Yes. We do." They descended together. The tunnel widened into a cavern so vast it swallowed sound. Ruins sprawled across its floor, pillars broken and reformed, archways grown over with glowing vines, stone etched with stories instead of warnings. The air shimmered with power that didn't press down. It welcomed. As Lyra stepped onto the cavern floor, the silver veins in the stone ignited, light racing outward in spirals. The ruins responded to her presence like a body recognizing its soul. She gasped. The mark at her hip burned, not painful, but alive. Heat spread through her veins, not wild now, but deep, controlled, resonant. The silver flame rose around her, slow and deliberate, lifting her hair, illuminating her face. Cale and Riven stopped short behind her. They felt it. The shift. This wasn't power stolen or triggered. This was power claimed. The ruins answered. Stone ground against stone as statues rose from the cavern floor, wolves carved in forms both regal and terrifying, eyes glowing softly as they turned toward Lyra. Their mouths opened, not in threat, but in recognition. Voices filled the cavern. Not loud. Not commanding. Ancient. Lyra dropped to her knees as the sound washed over her, not words at first, but emotion. Pride. Grief. Resolve. Love twisted with sacrifice. She pressed a hand to the ground, silver fire flowing from her palm into the stone. "I'm here," she whispered. "I didn't mean to be, but I'm here." The voices sharpened. Words formed. Flame-bound. Unchained. Daughter of refusal. Lyra's breath hitched as images flooded her mind, wolves standing against tyrants, alphas kneeling not in submission, but respect. Fire wielded not to conquer, but to end cycles of bloodshed that had fed on fear. "You were never meant to burn for them," the voices said. "You were meant to burn through them." Tears slid down Lyra's cheeks. All her life, power had meant punishment. All her life, survival had meant silence. Cale stepped closer, voice low, reverent. "Lyra, what do you see?" She turned to him. For the first time, she didn't feel smaller under his gaze. She felt vast. "They lied," she said softly. "About all of it. About me. About what this power is for." Riven swallowed hard. "And what is it for?" Lyra stood. The silver flame shifted, wrapping around her like armor, then sinking into her skin. Her bones screamed, not in pain, but in transformation. Heat tore through her spine, her muscles, her soul. She screamed as the shift took her. Not the frantic, broken shift of fear. A true one. Her body elongated, reshaping with terrifying grace. Silver fur erupted along her limbs, shimmering like molten moonlight. Her spine arched, her claws sank into stone, her jaw extended as power settled into form. Her true wolf emerged. Massive. Luminous. Eyes burning silver gold with ancient awareness. The cavern bowed. Not metaphorically. Stone cracked as pressure rippled outward. The statues lowered their heads. The ruins glowed brighter, reacting to her presence like a heart recognizing its pulse. Kale and Riven dropped to one knee, not forced, not compelled. Chosen. They felt it in their bones. This was not dominance. This was alignment. Lyra's wolf turned toward them, breath steaming, gaze piercing. For a terrifying moment, instinct roared, power recognizing power. Then her eyes softened. She stepped forward, lowering her massive head until her forehead brushed theirs. The bond ignited. Not chains. Not ownership. A joining. Kale gasped as silver light flared between them, sinking into his chest, threading through his wolf like wildfire tempered by steel. He felt her, not as a force to control, but as an equal presence that expanded him instead of diminishing him. Riven laughed, breathless and wild, as the bond snapped into place with him too, sharper, more intuitive. He felt her emotions flood him, fear turned into resolve, pain into purpose. "You're not ours," Riven whispered. "You never were." Lyra's voice echoed in their minds, deep and steady. "Nor am I alone." The cavern shook again. Not from her power. From fear. Something stirred beyond the ruins. A presence old and vast and hungry, recoiling at the awakening, but watching all the same. Far above, across the territories, alphas dropped to their knees as the wave of power rolled outward. Packs felt it in their bones, a shift in the world's axis. The age of fear was cracking. Lyra lifted her head and howled. The sound tore through stone and sky, through bloodlines and history, through lies that had hardened into law. It wasn't a call to war. It was a declaration. I am not your sacrifice. And somewhere in the dark, something answered. Waiting. Watching. Smiling. The cavern did not fall silent after her howl. It held its breath. Silver light still pulsed faintly through the ruins, like veins cooling after a storm of fire. Lyra stood at the center of it all, no longer lifted by power, no longer burning outward, but changed in a way that could not be undone. The ancient wolf had receded beneath her skin, leaving her in human form again, knees weak, breath uneven, silver still threaded through her eyes like a memory that refused to fade. Kale was the first to move. He didn't rush her. Didn't reach, as if afraid she might vanish, or explode or turn away. He approached the way one approaches something sacred, slow, grounded, deliberate. When he stopped in front of her, the alpha who had once been carved from command now looked stripped bare. I was taught, he said quietly, that power must be leashed or destroyed. Lyra met his gaze. There was no fire in her voice now. Only truth. So was I. Riven came up behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, the steady proof of him. He didn't speak at first. He never rushed the moments that mattered most. When he did, His voice was rough, honest in a way that left scars. They will come for you, he said. Not just councils. Not just packs. Everything that built itself on fear of what you are. Lyra nodded. She already knew. The knowledge sat heavy but clear inside her, like a blade she had finally learned how to hold without cutting herself. They always have. The difference now was that she wasn't running. They led her out of the ruins together. Not ahead. Not behind. With her. When they emerged into the night, the world felt altered, like the sky itself had shifted its balance. The blood moon had begun to fade, silver bleeding into its edges as dawn threatened the horizon. The mountain estate above was fractured, wounded by the awakening beneath it, but standing. So were they. From the forest beyond the stone terraces came the sounds of movement. Wolves. Dozens of them. Packs drawn by instinct, by fear, by awe. They stopped at the edge of the clearing when they saw her. Lyra felt their eyes on her skin. This was the moment. The one she had been taught to dread. The one where power demanded punishment. She stepped forward before Kale or Riven could stop her. No flame rose. No force pressed outward. She stood exactly as she was, scarred, barefoot, marked, unbowed. I know what you've been told, Lyra said, her voice carrying easily through the clearing. I know what you fear. Murmurs rippled through the trees. Wolves shifted uneasily, eyes glowing in the half-light. They said I would end you, she continued. That my fire exists to burn your world down. She took another step. I won't lie to you. I could. The clearing stilled. But power doesn't choose cruelty, Lyra said. People do. She turned slowly, letting them see her, really see her. Not the myth. Not the weapon. The girl who had bled in servant corridors. The woman who had been traded, sealed, silenced. I was never meant to die for your comfort, she said. And I will never kneel so you can feel safe. A few wolves dropped their gaze. Others lifted theirs. Kale moved to her side then, the alpha who had once been the symbol of control now standing without armor, without command in his voice. She is not our prisoner, he said. She is not our threat. Riven joined them, his presence sharp and unwavering. She is our equal. That word landed like thunder. Equal. No alpha command followed. No demand for obedience. Just truth laid bare. The packs shifted. Some stepped back. Some stepped forward. Some knelt, not because they were forced, but because something inside them recognized the end of a lie they had lived with all their lives. Lyra felt the weight of it press into her chest. This was worse than fear. This was choice. Later, much later, the mountain fell quiet again. Fires burned low. Wolves dispersed. Messengers ran to carry word across territories already trembling with rumor and unrest. The council chambers lay in ruin, their authority cracked beyond repair. Lyra stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the forest, the wind pulling at her hair, the world stretching wide and uncertain before her. Kale approached her carefully. They will test you, he said. Again and again. I know, Lyra replied. Riven leaned against the stone beside her. And you'll still wake up some days afraid of yourself. She exhaled, something like a laugh breaking through the exhaustion. I already do. Cale looked at her then, not as an alpha measuring strength, not as a strategist weighing outcomes, but as a man who had nearly lost something irreplaceable. And what will you do, he asked softly, when the fear comes back? Lyra didn't answer right away. She watched the forest. The shadows. The places where something darker still lingered, watching from beyond the edge of power she had awakened. When it comes, she said finally, I won't face it alone. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of promise. And danger. And the kind of future that demanded courage instead of obedience. Somewhere far beyond the mountains, something ancient shifted, amused and patient. She is not the only one, it whispered into the dark. Lyra felt it then, a shiver along her spine that had nothing to do with cold. The story wasn't ending. It was choosing its teeth. And now, the question lingered in the air, soft and unrelenting, meant not just for wolves, but for anyone who had ever stood at the edge of fear and wondered who they would be when the world asked them to choose. Would you have feared her? Or stood beside her when the world burned? And if this story awakened something feral in your heart, subscribe to Moonbound Werewolf Romance Stories. Because here, destiny doesn't whisper. It howls. The forest below stretched like a living ocean of black and silver. Moonlight glinted off leaves, catching the morning frost in jagged streaks that made the landscape look both beautiful and treacherous. Lyra stood at the cliff's edge, the wind tugging at her hair, pulling at the edges of her cloak, as if trying to whisper secrets she wasn't ready to hear. Her chest rose and fell with measured breaths, but the calm she wore was fragile, woven from exhaustion and the knowledge that she had survived, yes, but at a cost she could not yet name. Cale and Riven stood behind her, silent sentinels, the twins whose presence was no longer a weight of ownership, but a tether of trust. Cale's gaze swept across the horizon, calculating, protective, heavy with unspoken fear. Riven's eyes, sharp and bright, flicked toward her constantly, as though mapping the depths of her soul, reading the silver fire that still lingered beneath her skin. Together, they were no longer hunters and hunted, they were guardians of something far larger than themselves. And yet, the night was not finished. A shiver ran down Lyra's spine, one she did not attribute to the cold. It was a sensation older than the mountains, a stirring deep within the shadows that clung to the far reaches of the forest. Movement, subtle, silent, deliberate. She could feel it before she saw it. A presence that was watching, waiting, learning. It was not a single wolf, nor a pack she recognized. It was something ancient, patient. A predator whose eyes had not yet been revealed, but whose intent seeped into the air like poison. Her breath caught. The silver flame inside her stirred once more, not in panic, but in recognition. She did not panic. She had learned the taste of her own power, the rhythm of the fire that coursed through her veins. She had survived rituals, councils, betrayal, and blood. Yet even now, standing at the threshold of a world that had finally acknowledged her strength, she felt the pull of forces that would not bend, that would not submit. Cale's hand brushed against her shoulder, light, grounding, a reminder that she was not alone. His voice was low, cautious, and laced with the weight of everything they had survived. Lyra, the world has shifted, but there are still those who will challenge it. Are you ready? She turned her gaze to him, eyes gleaming silver in the dim light, every heartbeat echoing the truth of her survival. I have never been more ready, she whispered. Her voice was steady, but the silence around them pressed in like a living thing, full of questions and dangers she could not yet name. Riven stepped beside her, closer than necessary, but necessary nonetheless. Ready or not, he said softly, they are coming. And when they do, his words faltered, unfinished, but the implication hung in the air. She understood perfectly. Nothing she had faced so far had prepared her for what was beyond these mountains. Not the council. Not the rivals. Not even the betrayal. Lyra's gaze drifted across the horizon. The ruins below, where the ancestors had spoken through her, seemed to pulse faintly, echoing the rhythm of her heartbeat. The silver veins in the stone shimmered as though alive, as though acknowledging the presence of something else in the world, something she could not yet see, but would soon have to face. The wind carried whispers, fragments of voices that brushed against her ears, and she felt the weight of prophecy pressing forward again, relentless, insistent. A voice, older than time, slipped through the shadows like smoke curling over stone. It was low, threaded with amusement, warning, and prophecy all at once. The flame-bound has risen, it murmured, the words curling around her very bones. But she is not the only one. Lyra's pulse quickened. She stiffened, sensing the presence without seeing it. A predator hidden in plain sight, patient, unblinking, waiting for the moment to reveal itself. She understood now, this was not the conclusion of her story. It was merely the beginning of a deeper, more dangerous path. Her power had awakened the ruins, the mountains, and the packs, but the world was far larger than her understanding, and far darker than she had imagined. Cale's hand found hers, steadying, anchoring. Whatever is coming, he said, voice low and deliberate, we face it together. Riven's gaze flickered toward the forest edges, sharp as a blade. And we won't back down, he added. Not for them. Not for anyone. Lyra inhaled, the cold air filling her lungs, carrying the scent of frost, stone, and the forest's edge, a scent that now held a subtle undercurrent of something unfamiliar, something unseen. Her wolf instincts twitched beneath her skin, the fire in her blood flaring with awareness. The shadows beyond the cliffs shifted once more, almost imperceptibly, and she felt the weight of eyes that had watched empires rise and fall, that had seen power in all its forms. She straightened, silver light still lingering in her eyes, and looked out over the world she had begun to claim, not with violence, not with submission, but with the undeniable truth of her existence. She had faced councils, rival alphas, betrayal, and her own fear, and she had emerged whole, though not unscarred. Every scar, every twitch of silver beneath her skin, was a story, a lesson, a warning. The world doesn't get to decide what I am, she whispered, voice carrying over the wind, over the frozen trees, into the darkness that waited. I do. The ruins below shimmered one last time, as if echoing her defiance. The wind swept upward from the valley, carrying the faint, almost imperceptible sound of a howl, not hers, not Cale's, not Riven's, but something older, more primal. A presence unseen, waiting, measuring. The words of the voice repeated in her mind, cold and deliberate, she is not the only one. Lyra's fingers tightened around Cale's hand. The twins flanked her, solid and unwavering. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the pulse of the earth, the echo of her own power, and the distant, unseen threat lurking just beyond the horizon. She understood now that this victory, this awakening, was a temporary reprieve. The world had shifted, yes, but the war for survival, for control, for destiny, was far from over. She lifted her gaze toward the distant mountains, toward the shadows that clung stubbornly to the forest edges. Silver fire lingered in her veins, ready, coiled, patient. She did not falter. She did not blink. She did not run. Because the flame-bound had risen. And the world, every pack, every predator, every shadowed force, would have to reckon with her. A final gust of wind swept over the cliff, rattling the trees and carrying with it a faint, almost melodic whisper. The flame-bound has risen. But she is not the only one. Lyra's heart skipped, caught between anticipation and dread, her wolf stirring beneath her skin. She didn't turn to look at Kale or Riven. She didn't need to. Their presence was already a promise that she would not face what was coming alone. The camera of her mind, the story we have been following, pulled back, rising above the mountains, across the forests, over the ruins and the shattered council chambers, leaving the trio at the cliff's edge, silent, prepared, and unbroken. The wind carried her voice, quiet but resonant, out into the world. I am not your sacrifice. And in the unseen depths, in the shadows that stretched beyond the borders of all she knew, eyes gleamed. A presence waited. Patient. Calculating. Hungry. The story didn't end here. It never had. It was only gathering its teeth. And somewhere in the darkness, a new howl rose, faint, haunting, promising that the flame-bound was far from the only force shaping the fate of the world. The screen of the night fell into black. Silence reigned for a heartbeat, then a whisper echoed, insistent, unavoidable. This isn't over. The forest, the mountains, the shadows, they all remembered. And so did she. The hunt was just beginning. The power had been claimed. But the battle for destiny, her destiny, had only just begun.